The Trump 20-point plan, between a rock and a hard place, trying to move from stage 1 to stage 2. But is it possible? Is it one big deception by Hamas and its Qatari and Turkey supporters? Stay tuned for our Middle East Al-Shaq Al-Satlana featuring Khaled Toameh and Dan Diker. Please stay with us. Khaled Toameh, my dear friend and colleague for so many decades. Wow, what a complex situation. Not only Hamas, Turkey, and Qatar, but here your friend Dan Diker is broadcasting from New York and not next to you, but hoping to see you very soon here in New York. We're going to raise these very critical issues of Hamas's deception warfare to the American Jewish community, to the administration and others in the media, because there is so much confusion, Khaled, about where we are in the Trump 20-point plan. You and I have said on our program, Al-Shaq Al-Satlana, right here at the JNS studios, that, my goodness, we may not get past stage 1, and there are still 4 bodies that have yet to be returned, that have not been returned by the Hamas, as promised in stage 1. Looks like we're not getting anywhere.
Well, Dan, I mean, surprise, surprise, surprise. Hamas is not, fulfilling its commitments under the understandings of the ceasefire agreement or the Trump deal. Let me just remind you that Phase 1 calls for the release of all hostages, alive and dead, within 72 hours. Okay, Hamas has released all the living hostages. There are still 4 remains of Israelis in Gaza, and we are nearly, or actually we are more than a month after the announcement of the Trump plan, and there are still 4 bodies. So that's a breach of the violation of the Trump plan, of the Hamas, of the ceasefire agreement. When will Hamas release them? No one knows. I've been hearing since the morning that people close to Hamas are saying, "Oh, we're not holding them. It's Islamic Jihad, the other groups probably, and we are making an effort to find these, the bodies of these hostages." But here's what's important, Dan. Hamas is in no rush to move to phase 2 of the agreement or of the Trump plan. Phase 1 is fine with Hamas, and Hamas is saying, look, we agreed to phase 1 of the agreement because we wanted an end to the war and we wanted a quote-unquote prisoner exchange. That was the immediate priority for Hamas, to end the war. Now, in the last few days, I've been hearing from Hamas officials, and now they're saying, look, we never agreed to all the points of the Trump plan. These issues, phase 2 and phase 3, which talk about establishing a new administration in Gaza, which talk about demilitarization of Gaza, which talk about the deployment of international forces in Gaza, these issues are up for negotiations, according to Hamas. In other words, Hamas is saying, oh, look, I only agreed to release the hostages, dead and alive, and I also agreed to a prisoner exchange with Israel and an end to the war. So let's start now negotiating about the other issues. Why does Hamas want to negotiate about the other issues? Because they know that these negotiations can take months, years, and probably decades, and Hamas will exploit that time or take advantage of this period to reassert control over Gaza and to maintain a grip over the population of Gaza. And we are back to square one. We are back to October 6th. Now, the question is, will the Trump administration allow Hamas to get away with this? Will the Trump administration insist that Hamas fulfill all these commitments and all these understandings Let me remind you, Dan, that Hamas from day one has been saying, we will not lay down our weapons. Our weapons will be handed only to a future Palestinian state. So here's Hamas now setting conditions for disarmament. Hamas is also saying something very important, and I think, well, at least in Arabic, I don't know what they say in English. I don't care what they say in English, Dan, but they're also saying, listen, folks, we will not accept any non-Palestinian administration of the Gaza or the involvement of international experts in Gaza, in managing the affairs of Gaza. In other words, Hamas is saying no to Tony Blair, no to Donald J. Trump as chairman of the Board of Peace, and Hamas is saying no to any non-Palestinian presence in the management of the Gaza Strip. Now, this is also in violation of the Trump plan. Now, point 3, which is very important, the International Stabilization Force. Hamas has a different understanding of this whole issue of deploying international forces in Gaza. Hamas is saying, look, if you want to send international forces, that's fine with us. Put them on the border. Why? These forces are coming to Gaza to defend the Palestinians against Israeli quote-unquote aggression. That's their only role. These forces should have no role in policing the Gaza Strip, in patrolling the streets of Gaza, and in disarming the Palestinian factions in Gaza. In other words, Hamas wants monitors or a peacekeeping force that is similar to the UNIFIL, that has no mandate to go after the terrorist groups and the other groups inside Gaza. So this is what we are seeing here is Hamas trying to backtrack on some of the understandings with the Trump administration officials. Dan, there was something very important that U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff said recently. He delivered a speech, I think it was in Miami, in Florida, and he said that Hamas leaders told him or told Jared Kushner that they will disarm, that the group intends to lay down its weapons. Now, if you listen to Hamas officials in Arabic, they're saying the exact opposite. They're saying there will be no disarmament. We will not lay down our weapons until there's a Palestinian state. So Hamas is now trying to set conditions. Hamas is basically saying, okay, we've passed phase 1, or we are almost on the verge of ending phase 1. Let's launch endless negotiations that will continue forever over the other issues, police, a technocratic government, and the deployment of international forces. And this should sound an alarm bells in Washington and in other places.
Khaled, what the alarm bells you mentioned should warn the United States about is that under their very nose, the Trump 20-point plan has been kidnapped, co-opted by Hamas, who have turned it into the Hamas 20-point plan. This reminds us exactly of what happened at Oslo with the PLO-PA, Palestinian Authority, in which Yasser Arafat signed an international agreement with international witnesses, just like the Trump plan, and it was co-opted, and terrorism began to metastasize almost immediately after the signing of the accords. And we know that the accords ended up becoming Arafat's kidnapping of Oslo and turning it into the Arafat plan, which fronted jihad in a diplomatic package. This is what is happening today again. And we can say with confidence that Hamas is putting the international players in its pocket, because they are pursuing diplomatic jihad. They're pursuing social jihad on social networks. They're pursuing media jihad by making Israel the jihadi and themselves the fighting liberators of Gaza, even though now they're on the west side and Gaza is divided in two. And as you say very well, they're stalling for time. Why? In order to deepen their control of Gaza through the side door and the back door, in civilian clothes, through proxy militias and families that are dealing on behalf of Hamas in order to receive humanitarian aid that the United States is delivering, but that Hamas is largely still controlling. And finally, because they want the grand prize, Khaled, which is the $50 to $70 billion of reconstruction aid that is being promised by Arab countries, by the United States, and perhaps some by Europe. That's the grand prize. They stay in control. They deepen their domination of the Strip. They're very sophisticated. And this is what this multi-front jihad is like. It's not only about suicide bombings, as we saw in Oslo. It is about it is this multi-front jihad that people in the West are simply unaware of, or blind, or willfully blind to, and that is going to result, in our estimation, I would suggest, in major pressure on Israel, because the United States sees Israel as low-lying fruit, and it has got to keep the Qataris and the Turks happy to a certain extent. So in short, the more that Trump says, please God, don't dismantle the ceasefire, which is why they put pressure on Israel to free the 100, 200 Hamas terrorists that are now deep under the tunnels. They're doing that because of pressure from Qatar and Turkey. And the more that Trump says, oy voy voy, we can't break the ceasefire at any cost, the Hamas then delays and delays and delays and delays even more. That seems to me to be the game. And this is exactly what you and I are doing in the United States in the coming 2 weeks, in the beginning of December, is to make people aware of this game of deception so that they can forge policy and diplomatic and political decisions that are more, I would say, educated, in line with the political culture of Hamas and the Islamists. What's your sense?
Almost everything you said is very accurate. It's true. Actually, everything you said. I mean, I can't find a point where I disagree with what you just said. But let's again look at the larger picture. Number one, Hamas does not see the Trump plan as a peace plan. The Americans call it a peace plan. Hamas sees it as a tahdi'ah. I think this term or this word is familiar to us. We are very familiar with it from the past. Tahdi'ah means temporary truce,
calming down,
a period of calm. We've been to this movie before. I mean, how many tahdi'ahs and how many temporary ceasefires did we have with Hamas over the past 17 years? Several. Most of them were broken by Hamas. Hamas never honored them. And most of these agreements were exploited by Hamas to rearm, regroup, and prepare for another round of fighting with Israel. And this is exactly how Hamas sees the Trump plan. It sees it, number one, as a lifeline for Hamas, as something that allows Hamas to remain in power. When Hamas accepted the Trump plan, it was only because they were afraid that Israel was about to eliminate them, that Israel was going to finish the job. So that's why they quickly signed this agreement, because the top priority, the number one priority for Hamas was to end the war. And once the war ends, for them, this is another ceasefire. This is not a peace agreement. This is not Hamas joining the Abraham Accords. This is not Hamas recognizing Israel's right to exist. This is not Hamas abandoning the jihad. Hamas is actually saying, we have just completed another phase of the jihad, October 7, 2 years of fighting against the Zionist enemy. Now we need a pause in order to prepare for the next round of fighting. The goal is to liberate Palestine, to dismantle Israel and replace it with an Islamic state. This is Hamas's intention. They have not abandoned their ideology. They have not abandoned their desire to destroy Israel. And for them, this will continue. Now, you talked about Qatar and Turkey. When we say Qatar and Turkey, that's Hamas. You are actually saying Hamas and Muslim Brotherhood. And I repeat that it's a big mistake to get Qatar and Turkey involved with the Gaza Strip, because you will end up with Hamas even stronger than what we had before. And again, we go back to October 6th. If you want a role for Qatar and Turkey, it should be within a coalition that includes or consists of other countries. But once you bring Qatar and Turkey, that comes at the expense of the United Arab Emirates. It comes at the expense of Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and other countries. You are actually bringing the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas through the side door, through the back door into Gaza. And I think this is a point that people need to raise and talk about and, express even concern about it. Because I hear concern not only from Israelis, I hear concern even from people in the Palestinian Authority, even from other Palestinians who do not like the role that Qatar and Turkey are already playing in Gaza. Qatar and Turkey are already in Gaza, Dan. They're sending civilians to help with the removal of the rubble. They're sending relief workers and all that. And this is something that it will increase. And it's not good, not only for Israel, it's not good for Palestinians who oppose Hamas. It's not good for the United Arab Emirates and and other more moderate and pragmatic countries that have even outlawed the Muslim Brotherhood and that have repeatedly criticized Erdogan and Qatar for being the major sponsors of the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas in the region. So these are very important points that we need to pay attention to. We talked about Hamas buying time. This is Hamas's strategy right now. Let's buy time. And how do you buy time? You drag your feet with regards to the hostages. You say, oh, I'm searching for them. I need more time. And, look, the 72-hour deadline has become a month now. And we're still, waiting for Hamas to release the remaining hostages. And, they're saying we still don't know and we need more time. And then if and when they release the remains of the 4 hostages, then, it will take time before we start negotiating, according to Hamas, about phase 2 and 3. And this is where Hamas sees an opportunity to reassert its control over Gaza, as I mentioned before, and to use the negotiations as a vehicle for maintaining its control over Gaza, for rearming, regrouping, and probably also reproducing itself as something new. In previous podcasts we had, Dan, I warned about attempts, and I already detect indications for that, attempts to rebrand and reproduce Hamas. There is increased talk in Egypt and in other countries about establishing a new Palestinian security force in Gaza. Okay, but who are the members of these forces? Are we talking here about Hamas terrorists laying down their AK-47s, changing their uniforms, and joining a new group that will give them M16s and other uniforms and give them a different name? This is something we need to point out to people we are speaking to. There are other issues, and by the way, what I'm saying is all based on what I hear from Palestinian sources and Arab media reports and people I talk to in the Arab world, people who do not like the fact that Hamas is still standing on its feet. And you know what they're telling me, Dan? We don't understand, why are the Americans and other mediators negotiating with Hamas about the future of Gaza? Why are you talking to Hamas? I mean, once you talk to Hamas about the future of Gaza, you are actually legitimizing Hamas. You are turning Hamas into a legitimate actor in the Palestinian arena. You are saying Hamas has a say and should have a role in the future of the Gaza Strip, or even the Palestinians, and that's another big mistake. You should negotiate with Hamas only about the release of the hostages, disarmament, and demilitarization. That's all. This whole talk about allowing Hamas to present 40 candidates and 42 candidates as members of the new technocratic government and independent government, these are all slogans. This is the deception, Dan. I mean, do you think that Hamas is recommending or nominating people who hate Hamas or who are opposed to terrorism? Hamas is nominating the same people who support Hamas. And if Hamas is going to maintain security control over Gaza, as it appears now that this is the case, by the way, any government or any administration in Gaza will be under the mercy of the security forces of Hamas. So what have you achieved?
Yeah, you've achieved what's called a Hamas keeping force as opposed to a peacekeeping force. You have achieved a situation in which the Trump plan and all of its members will face greater and greater impatience and pressure because of the delay tactics of Hamas. And you're absolutely right. We talked about this on I think it was even last week's show or 2 weeks ago. The fact that Special Envoy Witkoff spoke directly with Khalid al-Hayya in Sharm el-Sheikh already represented the grand prize for Hamas's legitimacy. So now this has become more of a standard. And what has happened here, and I return to the precedent that Oslo created, where former Prime Minister Shimon Peres transformed Yasser Arafat from the most notorious international terrorist of the 20th century into what he called a peacemaker. And therein lies the danger of legitimizing jihad and the jihadists. And this is exactly where we are today. That Hamas is playing as a legitimate mainstream actor, which they never should be. It should only be Israel and the United States leading this with international backing. And Hamas must not be legitimized. Now that they've been legitimized, again, because Hamas will not allow itself to be pressured, because that is antithetical to jihad, it's again Israel. So that it really brings our conversation to a climax about Israel is in a position where it can ill afford to make mistakes and ill afford to reveal surprises to the United States. Because if Israel, it's very easy for Israel to make mistakes here and end up the bad guy because of these the jihadi tactics, the disinformation, the deception, the game playing of the Hamas that the Western powers that are sitting in the Israeli southern city of Kiryat Gat are not experienced with. They don't understand the culture, and therefore their plan would be to pivot to Israel in order for Israel, in a way, unilaterally to submit to this international urgency to get to the next stage.
Again, Dan, I mean, it's hard to disagree with what you are saying. Not because you're my friend, but you seem to get it. You're sitting in New York, and you really get it. We want more people to wake up. We want more people to see the reality as it is. We want more people to be aware of Hamas's deception tactics, of Hamas's delay tactics. We want people to know that the war is over. The jihad is not over. We want them to know that the terrorists are still standing on their feet. And as long as the terrorists are standing on their feet, that's bad news. And that means it's only a matter of time before we have more October 7 attacks, October 7 style attacks on Israel. I follow very carefully what Hamas leaders are saying in Arabic, and they are going on social media and they're going on, their favorite TV station, Al Jazeera. They are boasting that we achieved a lot of, as a result of October 7. It was a big victory for us. Of course, they don't talk about the death and destruction. How do they see victory then? How do they see achievements? They say, look, you just referred to it. They say, even the United States is talking to us. The superpower came to us. And this elevates our status. It means that the international community, led by the United States of America, recognizes Hamas as a major regional power in the Middle East. So for them, this is a big achievement. Sitting with the big Satan is okay, as long as this Satan is presented as if it came to Hamas to beg it to stop the war. See, they are describing this whole thing, the whole meetings with the Americans, as an effort by the United States of America to save Israel because Israel failed to destroy Hamas. So the Americans came to us, Hamas, and begged us to, agree to a ceasefire, and we did them a favor because they talked to us directly. They were nice to us. They were polite. Some Hamas officials are praising Witkoff. They're saying, in his meeting with Khalid al-Hayya, the Hamas leader, he was nice and very sympathetic because they both lost their sons, and
Their sons.
Now, you see in the tone of the Hamas leaders how proud they are of this big achievement. That the President of the United States of America sends his envoys to talk to us. So that's number one. Number two, Hamas is saying, look, I'm still standing on my feet. I'm still in Gaza. Israel failed to achieve its goal of removing me from power. And number three, we won a lot of international support. Look at the campuses. Look at the streets of European cities. Look at some areas in America where you have all these anti-Israel protests. They see these protests as solidarity with the Palestinians, solidarity with Hamas, and a step to further isolate Israel in the international community. So as far as Hamas is concerned, here's another achievement. And so on and so on and so on. So we need to be very careful. You always need to look at what the other side is saying and how the other side perceives this whole situation. It's all about perception. You keep talking about it, Dan, and that's very important. And if the other side is talking about achievements and victory and a desire to continue the struggle and that there will be more October 7 style attacks, then we need to be, very worried about what is really going on. We are not, or I have a feeling that many people in the West are not seeing or reading the full picture.
The full picture, absolutely, Khaled, is still dark, cloudy, smoky, and unclear to many in the West. Here's the final question that we might discuss now. If Saudi Arabia sees that Hamas, as a subversive, illegal entity in Saudi Arabia, by the way, continues to undermine and challenge the Saudi-led U.S. amenable, more moderate forces in the Gulf, not including Qatar, is there an argument to say that Saudi may well move down the pathway of normalization with Israel, knowing that the alternative is the continued subversion of Hamas? In other words, it gives them an excuse. The more jihadi action that continues gives Saudi an excuse to say, well, we don't need a Palestinian state because there are, a bunch of radical Islamic terrorists and we're not going anywhere soon. So let's go down the path with the United States of normalizing or getting special security status, non-NATO security status with the United States. They get all kinds of goodies from the United States. And with Israel, there's a possibility of moving down that pathway of normalization.
You know, Dan, not everything that Arab leaders say in public necessarily reflects what they really believe deep inside. I remember, I think it was President Jimmy Carter who once said or wrote somewhere that in his meetings with Arab leaders and heads of state, most of these people told him that they don't like the idea of a Palestinian state. And some of them were even bad-mouthing the Palestinians. I think there was another U.S. official who wrote in his memoirs about meetings with Arab leaders and talking to them about the Palestinians. So the issue of Saudi Arabia joining the normalization depends on one man, and it's MBS. Will he do it? We still don't know. It's very hard to tell. In the meantime, we do hear from him and from the official Saudi media, and the official Saudi stance or position is that, we want a Palestinian state. We want to, it's all conditioned on a Palestinian state. But let me remind you that other Arab countries, such as the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, they also support the idea of a Palestinian state. They're not opposed to the idea of a Palestinian state. So you can always say, look, I joined the Abraham Accords, but I did not give up the right of the Palestinians to a Palestinian state, and we will continue working with Israel in the future for a Palestinian state. So it all depends on MBS. Let's see what he will do when he goes to meet with President Trump. It also depends on President Trump, by the way, and how much pressure President Trump is prepared to exert on MBS and on the Saudis to accept it. The Saudis, and you pointed out correctly, they despise Hamas, they hate the Muslim Brotherhood. In 2018, the Saudi authorities rounded up all the Hamas figures and members in the kingdom. They threw most of them into prison, accusing them of supporting terrorism, accusing them of fundraising for Islamist terrorist organizations. And some of these Hamas people, including their 83 or 84-year-old leader, received lengthy prison terms. They were sentenced. So, the Saudis and many Arab countries understand the threat of the Muslim Brotherhood, the threat of Hamas, the threat of jihad, the threat of all these Islamist groups. They understand their deception, Dan. And this is where Westerners need to learn from these Arab leaders how to deal with these jihadists.
And that's where we are at Al-Shaq Al-Awsatlana, trying to share, reveal, expose, educate, and engage along these lines of Middle Eastern political cultures and the very distant and unknown principles behind it, one of them which is jihad of all varieties. And this is a key message for both of us to convey to our American friends, allies, and partners, as well as those in Europe, because otherwise we're going to continue down this path of completely ill-advised policy and undue pressure placed on Israel as a basis of this political, perhaps it's naivete, perhaps it's ignorance, but certainly very dangerous, maximum pressure, and that's our role. So thank you for being a teacher, an engager, and a partner. And let us move down this road. I would call this show Stage 2 Jihad. You can say the war is over, the jihad continues. Khaled, great friend and colleague for so many years. Thank you for this wonderful discussion we've had. I hope it helps our dedicated, loyal viewers to have a deeper understanding.
Thank you, Dan.